much for joining us today for this very first ArchiTalk. I would also like to thank our CASA Curtin student body for helping me out to organize this talk. I think we are hopeful that this could be an avenue to kind of facilitate networking between industry, practitioners, and university. Hopefully it will. Before the start of the talk, I would just like to make a few very short points. So this is one of a series. This will be hopefully a fortnight event during the semester period. Always Wednesdays, same time. It's not just for Curtin students and staff. Everyone who is interested in architecture is more than welcome to join. We are actually hopeful that other industry partners and practitioners could also join as well as the audiences. And we announce the updates through CASA and also school Facebook page and Instagram. You would receive Blackboard emails as well, so stay tuned. We will have 2 more talks for this semester. And last, before the start of the talk, we have a very short questionnaire, 3 questions for you students. Please, I really appreciate if you can give us your feedback before leaving the room. If you haven't got a copy, Ben has a few more copies, or is all? Okay. I'm really glad. Okay, I would like to thank and introduce our very special guest, Dimmity Walker from Space Agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, I'm Dimmity, and I have brought with me today Julia, who works in our office. And I thought that it might be interesting for people who are studying architecture to hear another perspective. Julia's a recent graduate, and she has been working with us for about 2 years. And she might, at the end of the first part of the presentation, give a little bit of insight into what that's been like for her as a graduate working in practice, that transitionary period. All right, so I am obviously from Space Agency Architects. Parisa suggested I might say a bit about who we were, and very briefly, obviously you can find out who we are from our website. It looks like that. And the sort of practice, the sort of projects that we do is quite varied. We do a lot of hospitality work, which restaurants and bars and things like that. We also do commercial, which I suppose there is a crossover with the hospitality, but we've done a couple of hotels where they're kind of more boutique hotels, not very corporate commercial work, more kind of travel and hospitality type commercial work. And then we also do some residential work, and that includes some single kind of houses, not a lot, but also multiple residential, and in that context, sometimes kind of a bit of urban planning as well, in terms of larger scale moves to create medium density housing projects, or as part of that process. So our scope and the sort of work we do is quite broad. We are a really small practice. We are about 4 people at the moment, and sometimes we're 6 people, depending on how we're feeling. And so as a really small practice, that means everyone in our practice has to be able to do everything, pretty much. So we're all, sleeves rolled up and get our hands dirty. We do everything. So from the graduate to myself, we will have quite a lot of crossover in terms of roles and interaction on all the projects and at all the different stages. So I suppose that's probably particular to our practice, and I imagine that different practices will have quite different modus operandi. But today I thought, rather than just talk generally about things, I would go into detail on a recent project that we have submitted for the Architecture Awards, which is a project that has heritage, has commercial, and has interior scope. So we are... so I thought that might give good insight into lots of the different areas of work that we do, that we can work across all of those different zones. So that project encompasses a lot of that stuff. So if I start off by introducing the mill, this is the mill as it stands today. It is in Katanning, which is, so this is sort of now in the corner of a prominent high street. Hi. That's all right. In this small country town called Katanning, which for those of you who don't know where Katanning is, it is on the inland route between Perth and Albany. That's probably its sort of where you come across it the most. And it's approximately 3 hours out of Perth. And the unusual sort of site, there hasn't been a lot of activity architecturally in that sort of area for a long time. Of those towns, Katanning and Narrogin and Northam and Albany, there's lots of beautiful old heritage buildings in those towns that since the gold rush and the sort of more prosperous era of those areas, they've sort of been in slow decline. Our client on this project has a pretty bold vision to reinvigorate a tourism industry stretching from Northam to Albany, and in the region focusing on the particular experience that part of the world can offer, which is quite different to the much more well-trodden paths of Margaret River and Augusta and the coastal route. And I think it's, his idea is pretty bold and he's got a lot of passion for the old building and for the big vision. And so we were brought along for the ride. The mill itself is a historically state register building, significant socially, and also significant for its ingenuity as basically a machine, the gravity-fed machine. The wheat all went in the base and was all carried up and slowly trickled down through the process and then deposited into train carriages that drove into the building. So there's lots of amazing texture in the building that's all part of its mechanics, I think. So it was pretty much intact as well. There it is. Obviously, when it was first built, it was a pretty significant building in the in the area. It was built in 1890, and it was the start of very first sort of industry in that those kind of. And this is Frederick Peace, who is the founder, and he was quite an important figure in the town. He was also important in politics of Western Australia, and he and his brother commissioned J.J. Talbot Hobbs, very significant architect in Western Australia, to design the building, and it was built very quickly and into production for quite a long time. It was the centre of town as the town grew up around it. It sort of occupies this very important corner, and here I think it is in the 50s, and it continued along in its life until it eventually became disused. Oh no, go back one. And in the sort of the town, the people of Katanning all sought to protect it. So by the time it became disused, they sought to find ways of preventing it from being demolished as a derelict building. and you fought for its retention over several decades. They tried to use it as a community centre, an art centre, a tourist centre, but and they managed to get it sort of transferred to the local council, the local shire, as ownership, but there was just not the money to do anything more with it, and then not the money to maintain it, and then not the money to transform it or bring it up to current codes for any other kind of use. So they then had the interesting idea to find somebody with a big idea that would be a game changer for their town, and they would sell the mill for $1 to that person who was going to present to them a compelling case that they were going to be able to do something really exciting with this building. And that is where our client comes in, and we can go to the next one. This is the mill when they took it over. Largely completely intact, obviously unfortunately painted pink, but the thing that changed most around the years was the veranda. And you can see going off to the sides the other sort of significant buildings that have all kind of generally fallen into a state of decline. He is our client. Our client is the CEO of Dome Coffees, and he was interested in bringing a Dome Cafe to this corner site on the ground. But then his idea was what to do with the rest of the building. And I suppose as part of his kind of thinking, he thought that there was opportunity for better quality accommodation in places like this, and there was opportunity to engage with the story of the place around there. There was lots of natural beauty, but also lots of historic beauty, lots of really interesting things that people might engage with beyond the building itself. And so his idea was to create this sort of travellers' inn, a small hotel that would be an oasis on that journey. They started off in-house. They have a lot of in-house people, and they got to a certain point with it where they realised that the building itself was so unusual and unique, and what they do, what their model is sort of a bit generic, and that there was a mismatch between the two aspirations. So they sought some input from a wide bunch of architects. I think the client's very engaged with the process and the conversation, and he went and stayed in some stunning places all over Australia and invited the architects to come and look at the mill, all of whom were, obviously it's a remote project, on the other side of the country, and they sort of were able to provide some, yes, what you've got, what your aspiration is probably not going to match what you're doing with the building, so you probably should get someone to do it. And ultimately, he arrived on our doorstep, and our involvement started at that point. So this is the space. This is the entrance where the train carriages came in and were loaded with flour sacks at the time when the clients took it over. As you can see, it's sort of in original condition. And this is some of the upper level equipment and machinery that was all intact as part of the mill production. This is the purifying equipment, pretty gorgeous looking stuff, all made of timber. It's just, it's like Willy Wonka, something. It's amazing. And then by the time, so then this is obviously from this point on our involvement in this project. The journey from that to where it is now, which is a 22-room hotel. The project obviously has provided employment in the town as one of the positive spin-offs for the area. Sorry, I'm waving my hands around too much. That's the signal. Stop. This is the entrance. So that the picture with all the pigeon poo, this is as it is now. This is the entrance to the hotel. So I should point out that we were not involved in the Dome Cafe side of things. We let them do that because they're quite skilled at that, and that's probably not really our thing. Our scope was confined to the hotel component. So the Dome Cafe occupies that sort of large white-out area there, and all their back of house in the area up there, and then other facilities that were done outside of our scope around the back and the side. So this section in the black lines was sort of where our interface with this project. We also designed the new veranda that wraps around the base of the building. So simple planning-wise, the entrance comes into that former big portal in the building, so that was a natural entry point. In this area here, this is significant circulation space, but also it's called the Arga area because there's a large Arga stove in it, and it has a variety of roles as a sort of flexible space that can be used for intimate dinners or for functions and parties. It's a meeting room that can be booked, and all of the toilets were done in our scope that also served the cafe. Here is the large boiler that was the driver of the whole mechanics of the mill. So upstairs is 2 floors of 11 rooms each. So we've fitted, none of the rooms are exactly the same because they all have to fit in and around and amongst a lot of existing material and text, just the envelope of the building required multiple different scenarios for the rooms. So we can look at some of those later. And then downstairs in the basement, we have a small bar that is suitable for about 50 people because there's only one exit. But it's quite an interesting space as well, and we will see some pictures of that. So we'll go in the section. This is where the train carriages used to come in to load, and that's where we've maintained our entry point and reception area. And this is the vertical void where the stairs, the lift and the Arga area all happen in there, and the floors of rooms above. So this is the very important, this is that central void area, and this is the steel boiler that used to be horizontal, was a train boiler, and then they came off the train track and stood it up, and it became the engine, the driver for the mechanics of the mill. So that's been retained in situ, hasn't been moved, so that's there, and that's the portal where the trains came in. So this is now the entry reception area, and what we've tried to do is play with the idea of country hospitality. You don't walk into a reception desk where somebody's sort of standing behind a counter. You walk into something that feels like a living room. There's a fire burning, there's comfortable chairs. It's sort of talking about that experience of being in the country and having that kind of quite unique, I suppose, quite a unique experience because the texture of the building is unique and everything about it is sort of selling that unique quality. On the other side of the fireplace are the stairs to the basement bar. We'll go down there, and this is very, very low, had to be excavated somewhat in order to be habitable. It's quite an interesting space. Just high enough. We inserted with difficulty this quite long bar through the centre, and you can see all these galvanised pipes there, the kept in situ, all of the original augers that scooped the grain up and took it to the roof. So there's this sort of scooping up, and so they have all been kept in situ, and a lot of the columns and piers and bits of machinery that drive it as much as possible was retained as part of the space. We liked that as well because even if you walked in there and there was just maybe, it wasn't full because of the columns and all the things that were in there, it felt like it was already inhabited to some extent. We reused materials, so from any of the equipment that had to be moved or removed to make way for the rooms. You can see the front of the bar has been used, all the recycled timber from some of those things, and then we used zinc, inorganic zinc, which will patina over time for the counter, so it will slowly sort of soften into that environment. Oops. That's just a picture of the basement before, and that's a picture under construction. The large pit under this timber floor was where all the is very deep. It's like a 3 metre deep pit where the grain was poured into, and we've covered it over with a slatted board and put a light down there, so as you walk across it you get a sense that there's something down there, but you can't see what. It's just a bit of fun. And then this is what's called the Aga area, so you can see the big black stove in the corner. This is again playing on the idea of the country hospitality. You're in the kitchen and you are part of a communal space, and I think a lot of things happen in kitchens, and so that was felt to be a really important space. So it is also the place where the vertical circulation, so the stairs rise up through here. Behind me is the lift, and the main feature of this space is the boiler that's retained. This table here can host dinners. So, for example, if you're a guest there, you could book a Katanning feast, I don't know what they call it, where you'll get roast lamb that's from the nearby farm, and all the other sort of local produce, and a special dinner can be catered for you in this location. But also during the day, a staff person might be working there, or for functions, this table serves as a bar as well. Going up through that space, this is on the second floor looking down. On this side you can see the lift shaft. That's been kept as a glass lift clad in steel mesh to allow, well, I suppose first of all the texture of it, so it wasn't something shiny and bright and steely or stainless steely, and also so that the journey up you can see the walls and the textures and so on, and that allows universal access from the lowest level to every single level. This is 2 pictures, so that's the lift looking through the lift into the sort of view that you would get as you go up, so that's quite an interesting experience. And then the stair itself is quite sculptural, really bold. It's obviously having a sort of relationship with the big boiler that's going through there, so it's quite a sort of strong element. And also because the space is a big void, we were able to use the balustrade of the stair clad in an acoustic material to try and prevent reverberation in that big void space. You can see it's quite atmospheric lighting-wise. We've got daylight coming from above here, but we quite like the dark and the light and the dark, because that adds a lot of drama to the space. Just so that you can see before. This is the stair lying around the ground outside before it went in and became the stair. And Alessia, who drew the stair, is there looking slightly worried, but it all turned out to be okay. And so it's good, but sometimes it's interesting to see the before the after. And that's in construction of the walkway, the lift shaft down here, and the stair going in on the other side. And that's the finished thing where all of the seamless experience is brought together. The important thing about the stair being in the big void is that lighting on the stair is quite critical, and so we chose to use the handrails to create the light locally rather than trying to light from above and create, ruin the atmosphere essentially. So all of those sort of brass chosen rather than stainless steel because it's going to patina and age and be soft. All of the nosings on the stairs, that creates the visual contrast but also matches the handrail and all those things. So the handrail is all bespokely made and also patinaed. I had to go and check its progress during its construction, but we didn't want little spots. We wanted a continuous light, and they've had to go and bend all the corners and all the bits and insert everything as a one-off thing, so it was quite an impressive exercise. And the finished details of the corners and then some of the different areas where that detail is used. So this is some of the circulation spaces in the mill. Obviously, circulation spaces, again, we've got noise issues in a hotel, and so carpet has been used, inset carpets on some of the walkway spaces, and the selection of that was something that would have an industrial reference to the texture, so that sort of herringbone pattern, which refers to some of the kind of straps, that's the word, that we used. And then in other rooms, we've gone with 100% wool carpets, and in the lobby, this very sort of almost Rothko-esque picture that has that sort of sunset kind of colours in the landscape without being, too obvious. But those kind of, it was really important to use wool. We're in the middle of sheep country in this place. And I suppose I'm showing you these because this covers some of that interior stuff that we did, which is obviously in addition to things like steel drawings for stairs and other things. So that all the way down to these sorts of details were things that were in our scope. Another part of the scope, or the part of the conversation that we're involved in, is the wayfinding in the hotel. And there was a graphic designer in-house on the team, and we were just involved in the kind of reviewing of all the proposals and the signing off on the ones that we thought were the most appropriate. And this system of using a sort of stencil, which referred to some of the flour sack printing that happened in the building at the time. So it's quite understated, and you can see how it's used in different circumstances, at room numbers and so on. This is another one of those circulation spaces, obviously quite a different light circumstances, quite bright and light. One of the important things we felt was, so this is in that room where those big bits of timber equipment were all used, and obviously a lot of that had to be moved in order to make room for rooms, but we felt it was really important to allow everything that could be retained to be retained, and allow the sense of what was happening on the ceiling to be perceived beyond the line of the room. So we didn't sort of chop that off in line with the corridor. We allowed that to sail past so that you could perceive the space bigger than what was just on the ground on the plan. And this is a little lounge area that is part of the retaining of this important piece of equipment that's so wacky. These are all made of wood and nailed together, and it's just extraordinary, the shapes and the angles and and then from above there's a mesh, and you can see through this material, this particular piece of equipment. So that allowed that little space to have to allow that piece of equipment to remain in situ, and creates a little lounge space. And these are some of the other bits and pieces that are remnant components in that room. And this is during construction, where you can see elements like these great big funnels and so on, that ultimately this is the cladding or the lining for the new wall that had to be cut off at that point. And so where it was cut off, we were able to clad that whole wall with again, acoustic material, but with a one-to-one scale drawing of the piece of equipment that was there. That was the actual patent drawings of the machinery, and you can see how that funnel connects into the drawing at the exact location of where the funnel was. Obviously, in a hotel, the most important component are the rooms, and in the rooms we designed a series of components that could be used in all the rooms, no matter, even though they were all kind of differently arranged and had different situations. So the most important thing is the bed, the bedside table, bed head, and this is the prototyping of those. So we were involved in the design of all of these furniture pieces essentially, and here we have the client and the furniture maker and the two furniture makers testing out the durability of the slats, obviously important in a hotel. The other component, so there were sort of three clusters of components. There was the bed head, and bedside table component. Then there was the desk, the fridge, which is that black box over there, and the television, which is essential in a hotel room. The intention was to make all these pieces was to be as clutter-free as possible, so they would be all mounted on the wall. There wouldn't be lots of legs and loose bits of furniture and things that could be moved around. And so they all had a very compact design, and they were able to be arranged in the different rooms in different ways. And this gives you a bit of process. There's templates were made for the set-outs of all the PowerPoints, had to be exact. Then, obviously, during the installation, how all those things kind of start coming together, and then the final component. Interestingly, we use this just a change of paint colour to kind of group the three elements into one larger field as a strategy for how to kind of make those pieces feel anchored to their spot. Okay. Close, okay. This is a bit of upcycling. These are the ceramic isolators that were all throughout the mill. We salvaged those and had a backplate made for them so that they could be used as robe hooks in the rooms. And these are the chairs that were made specially for the hotel. We didn't design these. Our furniture maker, who was making the other components, designed them, but we were involved in the prototyping and selection of all the finishes and marking up the bits that we wanted, adjusted slightly, and selecting leather for some of the communal areas and a canvas fabric for the rooms. So the rooms are divided up into 4 different zones. This zone here is called the bagging rooms, although it might have a better name than that. But anyway, that's what it was. It was bagging, where the flour went into the bags. And this is an example of one of those rooms. These rooms are the largest rooms. They had not much equipment in them. They're quite spacious, but they do still have a lot of the texture in the roof, all of the pulleys and the gear. And this is the other one of those rooms, which is an interesting feature, has a window into the communal area, which you can see from the walkway opposite. If you haven't got the curtains drawn, you can see into that room. There are curtains, so, depends how much of an exhibitionist you are. The other set of rooms is called the purifying rooms, and this is where all of that equipment was. And so these rooms, a lot of, again, retained elements, things like a staircase, which required us to have a different response to the desk and luggage console piece. There are really, really interesting rooms are these ones here called the silo rooms. And you can see in this corner here, this is the upper level of a 2-storey timber silo, which was just stacked wood from the bottom looking up down there, just bits of stacked jarrah with this really interesting connection detail. And we've made several rooms that connect around that. So in this room here, the bathroom is inside the silo. And in this room, the bedroom is inside the silo. And there's a bathroom picture, I think, later on. These rooms here were all built brand new, and they're referred to as the boiler rooms. Because they're new, they don't have the same texture, but they have all the same features, so bed and all those elements. But they are the smallest rooms, and they're all built new. Bathroom is the other element, where we selected, again, the brass taps and fittings, quite subdued lighting, and they're largely the same, obviously, apart from the timber silo bathroom. So we'll skip through. Oh yeah. So then that's again from the outside, and you can see the veranda. That's the new element that wraps around, and the cafe spills into that space. It's glazed, so it's a year-round space. And then I suppose we always like to see the spaces in use and how people use them, and that's, I think, a measure of how successful they are. So they've held several events in this space. This was a party that I think a local person who was very excited about the Rebirth the Mill they had a 50th in the mill and booked the whole hotel, and everyone stayed the night. It was a pretty good party, I gather. And that's looking down from above at those spaces and commingling together. And obviously they all woke up in the morning in the sort of beautiful glow of the sunrise. So that's, I suppose, part of that experiential quality of what's it like to be in this space. The other important aspect of this project is how it engages the economy of the wider area and looks for tourism-related opportunities. And they have sort of sought to sort of say, okay, well, if Katanning in this context is the centre of the universe, what are all the possible adventures you could have from here? And they make a suggestion of a variety of day trips, essentially, that you could take and have different experience on each one. When we stayed there, we went and did the Paronga Ups trip, and that was really fun. So the region, this is the sort of main street of the town. You can see it's quite some beautiful buildings, but as a country town, it has lots of pie shops and it's pretty grungy, really. But once you get outside, it's some pretty stunning scenery and places to explore. The kind of main important feature of the reason why our client chose this spot was because of the train line that connects it from Northam to Albany, which was the original trade, a very significant thing that actually created the towns themselves as its important sites, because the train stopped there. The train does not stop there at the moment, but that's something that he's working on. So that could happen in the future. And obviously onwards there would be potentially another project in that direction and another project in that direction if you know, that's a success for him. So that's where I finish. And now Julia is going to give you a little talk about... Oh, but you'll need this.
Oh, the microphone. Hello, I'm Julia. I work for Space Agency. A bit about me, I graduated uni, I actually went to UWA, finished at the end of 2016. During university I worked in a few small practices, mainly on competitions and a few kind of client-based projects, but lots of competitions, which is great because it's quite related to your experience at university. Post-graduation I won the Cameron Nickel Award and subsequently was offered a job there, which I took, which is where I had my sort of first experience in a large practice. I decided that it probably wasn't the best environment for me to begin my career, so I pursued a different position in a small practice, which I started in the middle of 2017, which brings me to today. And so I thought, going on from that, something interesting that I could talk about as a graduate is the sort of difference between large practice and small practice, based on my experiences of the two. Basically, the main things with large practice is there's lots of people, lots of things happening, lots of projects. There's a sort of, you get this understanding of the different roles within an architectural practice, from like a design architect, project architect, draftsman, there's 3D people, there's graphic designers, all sorts of different things going on. There's lots of administrators. And I kind of found it interesting to see that there is kind of beyond being an architect, there's sort of like then subcategorizes into all these different things that I kind of wasn't aware of at university. So you sort of work in big multidisciplinary teams, but then there's also sort of politics within these larger practices, because there's normally a couple of directors who are all sort of invested in different things, so that's also quite interesting. And then the other thing is that you sort of, the directors generally won't really work with graduates in a lot of these larger practices. They're sort of off at meetings, and a lot of the time you don't really have much interaction with these sort of larger figureheads. Whereas my experience in a small practice, it's more similar to being in a family. Everyone knows each other. You're sort of all working in this very intimate space. In a large practice, I could leave the office for an hour and no one would notice where I've gone. Whereas if I walk out the door, everyone's sort of suddenly very aware that I'm not doing my job and wondering where I am. which is good. But also you're sort of, you're constantly aware of everyone's movements and also everyone's moods, including yourself, so you can't really come to work in a bad mood and it not affect the other people around you. You sort of have to come in positive and work together. I guess why did I choose small practice? I thought that for me, at the beginning of my sort of career as an architect, I thought it might be more valuable for me to sort of work directly with a mentor and sort of gain this real understanding of the whole of an architecture practice rather than sort of like this very small piece, which is sometimes a larger practice experience. And I suppose project specific, I kind of preferred the work of Space Agency and was sort of drawn to that as, I guess, my practice. That's someone's phone. And so I guess some general advice, not that I don't know if I'm someone that can be giving advice to people at university, but is to form a clear idea of the type of environment you want to be in. I think it's kind of important to have, to sort of be strategic in your pursuit of work after uni, to sort of have an idea of what kind of architecture you're interested in, what sort of projects might appeal to you, to place yourself in an office where you might be exposed to a whole range of experiences if you think that this is important, rather than a sort of office that might just do residential architecture. Use your interview to find out everything you can about the firm and their design process. I think that that's quite important because you sort of, as a graduate, you get really scared when you have to interview and you sort of don't really know what you're doing. So I think it's important to sort of ask lots of questions about the design process of the firm that you're applying. So as a graduate, what would your role be? Do graduates typically have much to do with the design process? All that stuff's kind of important, I guess. Once you get in there, you're going to have a different experience. So I think it would be useful to sort of ask those questions first up so that you know what you're expected to do. Be confident in the skills that you as a young graduate can offer. I think like a big thing for me when I began work as a graduate was that I didn't think that I knew anything. I was pretty confident in my ability to be able to design, but I suppose very unconfident with my abilities to actually design something that someone could build that wouldn't fall down, and like I had generally no idea about like structures and technical drawing and all that sort of stuff. But I suppose it's important to remember that youth is the future and that as graduates we're full of ideas and energy and enthusiasm, and that's an attractive quality to firms. So yeah, it's important to remember that that sort of experience with how to build a building will come with time in practice, but don't discount your ability, your enthusiasm as a sort of an attractive quality to employers. Software. I guess as a graduate it's important to stay at the forefront of technology. BIM is sort of this wave that's taking over, and sort of I guess when I was at uni, where BIM wasn't really a thing that anyone was doing, we were kind of like ArchiCAD and SketchUp. So I think that it's more, you're more employable if you know how to use a program like Revit and ArchiCAD, so it's definitely worth pursuing that and learning those programs. I suppose I was lucky when I started that they were accepting of the fact that I didn't know how to use ArchiCAD, and I learnt that in the job. But I suppose it's a good thing to know before you start to look for work, because right away someone can see that you know how to use these programs and they know that they're not going to have to spend the time teaching you what to do, which is good. Be passionate, don't appear tired or bored. I think it's really important to read about architecture as much as you can and never stop learning. If you see a project you like, don't just keep scrolling, stop and take the time to figure out what it is about that project that you like and that you connect with. I think that this is just a general part of your evolution as an architect, is to sort of identify the things that inspire you and to hold those with you and not to forget them. I like to keep a little folder on my desktop with images that I see that I like, that I refer back to from time to time. Shameless self-promotion. So I suppose something that I've worked out is that architecture as a profession is kind of seriously undervalued, especially here in Western Australia, more so than in the eastern states, places like Victoria. And I think that is because the majority of the general public don't understand what it is that we actually do. And so I think it's important, and I guess your job as an architect is to kind of spread the word about why you're important, what services you can provide to people, and to really bang on about how important it is to use an architect, because otherwise we're not going to get any work. Apply for invisible jobs. Writing speculative but well-worded letters or emails to your favourite firms. It may seem like a long shot when you're applying for work, but you might be surprised how successful this method can be if it lands on the right desk at the right time. I suppose that's how I got my job. I was working at CCN, but sort of sending some things around to people who architects that I was inspired by, and while there wasn't a job that was specifically advertised, that's how I ended up in this role. So I guess it shouldn't be your sole strategy. You should still kind of check things like Instagram or follow architects that you like, because more likely than not they'll post job opportunities there. Or the Institute has a job board, which is also quite a good tool when you're searching for jobs. And I suppose my last point, which is probably the most corny of all, is don't give up. I suppose when I started architecture school, the tutors would always say that 50% of the people that start don't actually finish the degree. So I'm not sure if everyone in here is in masters or where you are in your journey through university, but it's important to keep pursuing it, because it's great when you kind of come out the other end. It's really fun getting into practice and sort of working with clients with budgets, and sort of the next part of your journey is always is more about intent and effect. So you sort of take all these ideas and question the viability of them, and I guess with budgets it comes down to how you can achieve everything that you want to achieve, but perhaps sometimes in a more economical way. And I suppose, yeah, just show your passion, do lots of reading, be inspired by architects, know who inspires you, and you'll be fine. Thanks.
We probably don't have any time for questions, but if you have any questions, let me know.
We've got like 7 minutes.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether
We do have
there's
time.
another class after this, but if not, we can still stay here. So any questions?
No questions.
Did you ever have to tell your client that you thought their expectations were too high for this particular project?
On this project?
Yeah.
No, I think on this project is an unusual project. The way in which it wasn't a sort of document and tender scenario. It was a contractor who they work with on a lot of projects, and the client and us working together there, and always often uncovering things and responding to them, rather than having, so there was a bigger picture vision, but then it was sort of incrementally working through all of the issues. And I think sometimes we would say things like, oh, you wouldn't bother doing that, that would just be ridiculous, cost too much, da da. But this client would say, no, that's what I want to do. And so we'd be trying to talk him down, because our experience of working in the commercial world is a little bit more, people are like, no, you can't have that fun thing, that's too much. So, no, we were always going, no, don't do that, it's not worth it, but he would always want to go the extra. And I think for him, this was the first project of several, and I think it was sort of looking for that benchmark and what was possible, and you know, happy to put in the extra at this stage and then look at what worked and what didn't for the subsequent projects. I think that he's pretty passionate, and he would do things that we thought was just not necessary. Yeah.
How's the project going? Is it looking out well and
Yeah, they've had quite a few sort of events up there. So they've had the Taste of the Great Southern, and they had another food-based kind of thing called Forage Festival, and I think they had the Citron Car Club all drive there from all over Australia and stay. So I think it's been it's caught the imagination of quite a lot of people, and I think one particular bunch of people who go there, which they weren't expecting, were actually farmers from the region who want to have a nice getaway for a weekend, can't leave their farms for long periods, and they're having to go all the way to town to go to do something, which is, to the city is much further. So they're sort of mini break for those people is quite, an unexpected market for them. But no, they regularly have very good occupancy, and they're pretty happy.
I was just wondering which project category, urban, residential, commercial, or hospitality, do you find most successful, and why?
We find most successful
In which category, urban, residential, commercial, or hospitality?
that we find most successful or most interesting. I don't know, I suppose we have success in all those categories. So multiple residential, Knutsford project won a lot of awards, including a national award a couple of years ago. In hospitality, sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat. Again, we've had national and state and national awards for some of our hospitality projects. And for commercial, something like the Alex Hotel in the city, again, has also won state and national awards. So successful-wise, they're all good. And I think in terms of interestingness, I think what we like is to be able to do all those different things and not just be doing one thing. So it's interesting to be able to do a restaurant because they're kind of quick and they're pretty demanding in terms of a commercial environment, robust, but also to be interesting, and there's lots of theatre involved. And then projects like a hotel, so this one is pretty interesting because there's a lot of components, interiors, as well as commercial operations side of things and built forms, so that's all pretty interesting. And in multiple residential, I think that we like to look for ways of doing that aren't necessarily the usual way of doing it. So we find that interesting as research to push the boundaries of what is happening here in Perth and look for ways of making it incrementally better, or looking for little takes on it that are unusual and can push things, the standard up in a sort of wider context.
And are there any unique design approaches you're implementing that stand out from other architecture firms?
Well, we probably like to think so. It's hard to pinpoint what that is, but I suppose we think we bring something particular to a project that another practice would do differently. And I think that we have a lot of experience in those areas, and we obviously bring that experience, but each time we try not to have a preconceived idea about how something's going to be, so we like to explore the opportunities of each project, so we don't have a fixed way of responding to a brief, so that's always makes it exciting.
That fine level of detail and, I guess, attention, selection of materials and things like that, do you find that that's harder to achieve on other projects with a more limited budget?
Yes. Julia's working on a project at the moment where the budget is like zero, isn't it?
We still designed all those things for some reason,
things.
but I don't think they're going to be successful.
Well, we design a lot of things, and in a very hard commercial project, a lot of things we design, they go, that's too expensive, put it away, that's too expensive, put it away. So, but we're always looking for a way to achieve a really impactful outcome within the constraints.